Today's session is going to be something that is going to be really interesting and really thoughtful. And so we're going to be talking about how we move teacher voice into policy change. But before we jump in, just we have some housekeeping items that we like to go over. Today's session will be recorded, so you will get a copy of the slides and the recording that'll be sent to you later this afternoon. And then we love engagement. So as any questions, any thoughts come up, please interact in our chat, share what you're thinking, your reflections. And then what we'll do is we'll leave a Q&A section at the end before we wrap up. And then for everyone who is on the call, we do have a giveaway. So if you stay until the entire webinar, you will get a chance to win a $50 gift card. So really exciting. Before I introduce today's host, I want to give a quick shout out to Martha Moore. She is our Learning Integration Specialist here at Parsec, who's also on our webinar. Martha is the reason why Bob and I were connected and why he's on the webinar. She has spoken really highly about the work that he's doing and leading in Jackson-Madison County and just his commitment to elevating teacher voice. And so we knew that when that topic arose, we had to have him on this webinar. And so thank you, Martha, for that. But with that, about our amazing guest, Bob Sparks, he is the Dean of Operations at Jackson Central Mary Early College High School. But before that, he spent 18 years teaching teaching secondary English. He also designed and co-leads the JMCSS Educator Fellowship, which is a really innovative leadership program that equips educators with education, policy knowledge, and communication skills so that they can elevate their voices at a local and a state level. So today he'll be walking us through three things. He'll be sharing why the fellowship program is important and what gaps it was built to fill. He'll talk through how it works, the structure, the sessions, and he'll even show us what a day on the Hill looks like. And then at the end, he'll share tips that you can take back to your district or charter to be able to advocate for yourself. And so we're really excited to have Bob on this webinar with us. And with that, Bob, I'm going to pass it on to you.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. And I am glad to be here today. Hello from Tennessee. I know we've probably got people from all over on this webinar today. But I'm here to share about this program, as Say just mentioned, the JMCS Educator Fellowship, something that I helped develop to really elevate teacher voices. So why did I do this? Well, it started with a problem that I saw. I had some opportunities to begin to learn about education policy and get connected with some leaders at the state level. That's where I met Martha when I was on the Teacher Advisory Council for the state of Tennessee. But I quickly realized as I was attending some of these meetings that there weren't always a lot of teachers in the room. And really, I think it's an endemic problem, not just in Tennessee, but across the nation, that educator voices are lacking in education policy decisions. And classroom teachers in particular need better opportunities to develop their leadership capacity. A lot of times, a teacher may not want to go into administration, but what other opportunities do they have to demonstrate leadership? And I think the education policy arena is one of those areas. So then the gap that I wanted to address was how could I help create more opportunities for educators to learn about policy? Because it can be kind of a jargony, esoteric thing. But then once they have that knowledge, how can they advocate? How can they speak out and speak from their classroom experience? Because as I, again, was involved in some of these discussions, I realized there was a big disconnect. A lot of the people with the levers of power, making these decisions, department officials, legislators especially, either had never been in a classroom or had been a very long time since they were in a classroom, and they were missing this kind of on the ground, kind of transparent perspective of educators who are doing this every day with their students, trying to push them to grow and achieve more and more educationally. And often, as I felt when I was a teacher, sometimes there'd be frustration about why certain things were the way they were. And a lot of times those frustrations weren't necessarily a school building thing or even a district thing. It stemmed from policies or laws that had been set at the state level. So what was the solution that I kind of landed on and helped develop my district? Well, it was this educator fellowship. A couple years ago, I'd been a part of one particular state fellowship that the SCORE, State Collaborative on Reforming Education, had put together. And so I'd kind of learned about that model from that. And so I kind of pitched the idea to my superintendent one time when I was able to talk to him. And he was intrigued by the idea of like doing a type of district level program to help me share this knowledge I've gotten and equip other teachers with it to do this work. And so I came up with a proposal and I shared it with him, and he said, "All right, let's do it." And so the goal of this program, or the solution, was we're going to develop a team in Jackson-Madison County Schools of educators, give them the policy knowledge, and then give them some opportunities to actually be in the room with the policymakers, with the people making these decisions. So that's why we did this. It was to fill that gap and to address this problem. But how does it work? So, as I've shared with people about this program, some people are just kind of like, how can you pull this off? Well, there was a couple different elements, and I'm just going to kind of walk through a big picture of the fellowship program as we developed it. You can see there on the screen, that's our superintendent's press release when we first launched the cohort back in September. But essentially, it's a professional development initiative that seeks to empower certified educators with policy knowledge and communication skills. So again, we intentionally designed this to be for teachers, guidance counselors, instructional coaches. The people in this fellowship were not in administration. We wanted people who were working with students in the building each day to be the ones who can elevate their voices. And we wanted to give them this knowledge of this world of education policy. Again, it can kind of be an exclusive group sometimes until you learn the lingo and you learn some of the players and that are involved in these decisions. And so the program, across the year, it helps them develop their leadership skills. It helps them develop and practice advocacy, and then engage with community stakeholders and state policymakers. We kind of had a local community focus that I'll talk about in a moment. And then we also had the bigger culminating experience was to engage with leaders at the state level. And again, the overarching goal of this was really just to elevate their voices and give them a platform, some of our exemplary teachers in our district, a platform to share their perspectives and insights with these leaders. So that's kind of the program in a nutshell. And that's our logo there that we developed here in the district. And we kind of, as we sat down and designed this program, I designed this program alongside our district chief of staff, Melissa Spurgeon, last summer. And we kind of nailed down four kind of overarching goals to guide this fellowship. Again, number one, we wanted to help our fellows learn more about education law and policy, and really be able to think at a systems level, to really see the big picture of like, okay, there's this issue that's maybe affecting my classroom. Well, how does this sit within this broad, as I call it, the ecosystem of education law and policy? And then again, help them become leaders in this space. As educators. We wanted them to explore these issues, and again, look at, okay, how does this law relate to what's happening in my classroom? We talked about lots of case studies and examples. Like, for example, in Tennessee, the third grade retention law always comes up because it's a very concrete example of a law that was passed at the state level that has had lots of impacts on teachers, schools, families, and there's been a lot of back and forth trying to make changes in those laws based on feedback from teachers and other stakeholders. So we look at case study examples like that. And then also we embed in the program opportunities for them to gain experience using their voice. In the fall, we start out smaller with just having some panels with some local leaders. But then by the time we come to the spring and we get to the day on the Hill, they're actually having meetings with policymakers in Nashville. And then ultimately, one way we present this to the policymakers is that we really, my superintendent, we talked about this. We really wanted this to be a non-adversarial type advocacy program. There are lots of groups out there doing advocacy, and I think the more advocacy, the better. But we wanted to kind of present ourselves as a support, as a aid to the legislators to really help foster a positive interaction, a positive relationship. So the way we present it is we have important perspective and experience on the ground, and we just want to share from that experience with the policymakers and help them have better information and better facts so that they can make decisions that are going to be best for students and teachers and schools across the state. So that's kind of some of our goals and some of the ways that we've embedded those goals in the program. I mentioned a little bit that in the fall, the fall is very heavy on just learning. It's a lot of just learning about the education law and policy ecosystem. In Tennessee, and every state is a little different. So if you were going to do this program in your state, it'd probably look a little different because every state's policy and legal structure is different. But in Tennessee, we've got the Department of Education, we got the State Board of Education, we have lots of players that are involved in these laws and policies. And so the very beginning of the program is just helping the fellows figure out who all these people are and what they do and what their roles and responsibilities are. Because when you get down to advocacy, you've got to really know if there's an issue you're passionate about, you've got to be able to go to the right person. You might have a concern about something, but if it wasn't a law passed by the legislature and it was a state board thing, you don't need to talk to the legislature. You need to go talk to the state board member. And so, really helping our fellows learn how to navigate that and understand those differences. We also, Jackson's kind of unique in that we have, I want to say, 5 or 6 higher education institutions. And so we had one panel where we brought in the presidents of several of those, and the fellows got to talk to them. And that was kind of one of their first forays into talking with an education leader. Um, and then again, we're just learning about the law and policymaking process. We brought in some speakers from some state level organizations who have experience in that. We had someone from the state board come, someone from SCORE, former chief of staff at a large school district in the state. They came and really talked about the nuts and bolts of like how does maybe an issue or an idea go from its genesis to actually becoming a law or a policy that impacts what we do in the classroom every single day. So that's kind of the fall. It's very heavy on the learning, but as we transition into the spring, this is where they really begin to do the advocating and get to use their teacher voice. And so we kicked off our spring sessions with a local leader roundtable. We pulled in the county commission, our local mayors, and again, in Tennessee, our funding body is the commission. And so we wanted them to have some local advocacy experience because we know those local leaders have a lot of impact as well. And then we came to our really big culminating experience, which I'm still just over the moon that we pulled it off. But we had a day on the hill, and that was kind of always going to be the culmination of the fellowship is actually going to Cordell Hall, that's the legislative office building in Nashville, and meeting our legislators in their offices, going to a committee hearing. We even were able to secure a meeting with Governor Bill Lee. And so that experience it was the culmination, but it was also, I feel like for a lot of the fellows, it was like the aha moment when it really clicked, like, oh, this is why this is important. And, oh, we really can do this. Because I think another piece of this is there can be a lot of feelings of intimidation, when you're like, oh, I'm going to go talk to a legislator, I'm going to go talk to the governor. And the reality is they're just people. Yes, they're people in positions of power and leadership, but like we are their constituents, and we should have the opportunity to talk to them about these issues that affect our jobs, our students, our lives. And so really just, reducing those feelings of intimidation and really empowering the fellows to feel like, okay, I can do this. I can go talk to my legislator about these issues. And then finally, at the end of the year, this was actually just yesterday, we wrapped our first year. They developed action plans. How are they going to take this experience and pay it forward? Do they want to stay engaged with the next year's fellowship? I have some ideas about how we might employ them to lead next year's group. Do they want to write an op-ed? Do they plan to go sign up to testify for a bill next year? We talked about several options that they can take this experience and continue to be advocates and use their teacher voice. But again, that's kind of the program structure as a whole. Fall is more learning, spring is more advocacy. Heavy, as you can see, here are some pictures from some of our learning sessions. Those are some of the fellows. It was a cohort. It was 12. And as we selected these fellows, we're a large district, about 26 schools and probably about 13,000 students. And so we really wanted to have a group that was representative of the district as a whole. There were a few gaps. We had elementary school, middle school, high school all represented. We had a guidance counselor, we had an instructional coach, 2 instructional coaches, we had a special education teacher. And so really as we looked through the applicants that we had, we really tried to develop a diverse group to be able to represent our district as a whole. And so we met 7 sessions throughout the year, including the day on the Hill. And then if we go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about the Day on the Hill experience. So the way this worked is, prior to this, and really anyone could do this, you can email your legislators when they are in session, whenever that is during the year. In Tennessee, it's in the spring, January to April, and you can ask them, hey, can I set up a meeting with you to talk about XYZ? And sometimes you get no, and sometimes you get, well, they're busy today, but we picked a date, we set a date, and I reached out to lots of legislators. First off was our local legislators for here in Jackson, Tennessee, our senator, and we have 2 Tennessee House members. But then I also spread a wider net. There are a lot of House members from all over the state and West Tennessee in particular that are on education committee for the House. And so I reached out to them. And so as we went into the Day on the Hill, we had three to four meetings set up. One of those being with the governor. I was able to schedule that. And then we also plan to attend an education committee hearing. And so the goal of the Day on the Hill was to just really let them experience what it's like up there as legislative session is happening. I mean, it's a busy place. I'm sure across the country, in Capitol buildings, it is similar. There are lots of people there to talk about lots of issues, and it can be very kind of overwhelming at first. But as I went with one of the groups into one of the meetings with pardon that. Um, so as you can see, we're in the center picture. We met with, that's one of our local reps that we met with. And as we went into that meeting, the three fellows that I was with, they were visibly nervous. It was their first one, and they were like, "What are we gonna do? Are we really ready for this?" And I could tell they were sweating a little bit, But we went in, and we sat down, and again, we presented ourselves as like, "Hey, we are some teacher leaders from Jackson-Madison County Schools. We're part of the Educator Fellowship Program, and we are here just to learn about the policy process and also share some of our perspective and concerns." And we again, with this positive kind of framing, like we had a very frank and positive discussion with our representative. He was very gracious, and it was a great conversation. And each of the fellows got to kind of share a little bit. And then I won't forget, as we left, one of them, he said to me, he's like, "Man, I could talk to anybody now." Like he felt this like burst of confidence because we'd had this successful meeting, and all of a sudden it was like the feelings of intimidation just kind of like melted away. And a lot of them spoke to that experience. Like, yes, it was a little intimidating at first, but then after they went through this day and had talked to several people, they realized like these are just people, and like we can go in and talk to them about education issues. Um, and the other thing I'll mention, personal connection is always important. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. One of our representatives, one of the fellows had taught his grandkids, I think, at their school. And so that was a personal connection that he was able to make. And I told him after that, I was like, I bet he met with like, I don't know, 100 people that day. But he's going to remember that conversation because you taught his grandkids. And like he was able to talk about an education issue that was affecting, the schools. And that's part of it is like building these relationships, getting teachers in front of our policymakers, not just so they can talk about education, but so that they can make a personal connection that then they can follow up on again later. Make a phone call, send an email, maybe go back and meet with them again. Because ultimately, when it comes down to this work of the fellowship and advocacy, it is relationship work. Policy work is people work at the end of the day because we're all people that are making these decisions. And so if we can equip teachers to go and build these relationships and then have the background knowledge and the expertise to be able to talk about the issues, like we're going to elevate teacher voices. And I truly believe it's going to make a difference in the way education policy is shaped in Tennessee, and elsewhere as well. And so the final thing I want to just talk about briefly is again, just share some tips for, well, oh, I forgot, we got feedback. So I did want to highlight, I pulled some quotes from some of the reflections the fellows have turned in, submitted this year. You can kind of read those for yourself, but I think there's more than this, but all of them, they really express just again how enlightening the experience has been, how they've really benefited from learning about policy, something they maybe were very much a novice at the beginning. And then just feeling like, okay, policymakers do want to hear from teachers. We can make a difference. Yes, sometimes there's contentious issues. Yes, there's debates around things, but I truly believe, and one thing I tried to stress to the fellows is I really believe education can be a consensus building bipartisan issue again. I think in the last few years, unfortunately, there has been a lot of contentious debates around education, but it doesn't have to be this way. And I think one way we can help mend that is by just getting more teachers involved in the conversations around what's best for students and what's best for our teaching professionals, in the state of Tennessee and all around the country. So finally, just as I get prepared to wrap up, if you were going to do this, if you were going to go advocate for teachers or for education, what are some ways you could do it? Even without a fellowship program, if you just wanted to do this, well, I think there's 6 or 7 things you can kind of keep in mind here. One, again, as I just mentioned, I really think for this to be effective, I think keeping students at the center is essential. At the end of the day, as an administrator, as a former teacher, like I want what's best for students. Like we want our students to succeed and get the best education they can. And so if we're going to go advocate, that needs to be our North Star. And I really do believe we want to try to build consensus and avoid all the partisan disagreements. And people may have different opinions on that, but I think there is a place for consensus around education that we can hopefully get back to. There are going to be disagreements. There are going to be places where we don't agree with a policymaker, or maybe we have a different perspective. And I think we can challenge people, but we need to do that with respect. And I think importantly, we want to critique the policies and not the people. I think unfortunately, a lot of times people start getting attacked when really we really just need to focus on, okay, what's the policy and maybe how can it be improved, or what's the issue here? When you're in a conversation with someone, or if you're like I was with a group of advocates, you really want to balance monitoring the airtime with sharing your voice. You don't want to monopolize that. You want to let other people feel like they can be heard. I think that's a big part of this is people want to feel heard. But you also want to share your voice. Don't let yourself not be heard because you're timid. Like if you're in a meeting with a policymaker, like you're a constituent, like they should give you a chance to share. You also want to balance the particular and the general. It's really easy to get caught up in this one specific issue with this one kid, maybe in your classroom. I'm not saying that's not important, but when you're in these kind of conversations, try to think systems level, big picture. How is this issue not just affecting this one kid, but how is it affecting kids across your state or across the country? And I think very important, there's a lot of research on this that we might think that we would love to think that everyone is data driven and it's the facts and statistics that's going to move the needle. And those are important. But ultimately, a lot of times it's stories that are really going to change people's minds. So as you go to meet with someone about a particular issue, do you have a story about how that is affecting like your classroom or a family in your district or you as a teaching professional? Like what story can you share to maybe illustrate the data or the facts and statistics that you maybe have to back up your position? Um, and then finally, you can really combine these last two. Be solutions oriented and then make an ask. When you have an advocacy conversation with a policymaker, what's the ask? Like, do you want them to support a certain policy? Do you want them to take another look at something? Um, what is the thing you want them to take action on? And I mentioned this earlier, always make sure you're talking to the right person. And this is where doing a little research and learning about the policy ecosystem in your state's important because not everything starts at the legislator. It might start at the state board, or it might start at the governor, or it might start at the Department of Education. So you want to figure out who do you need to talk to first and foremost. But I know that's kind of quick, but those are just some tips for effective engagement that I've really been teaching the fellows this year and that we've been able to put into practice through this program in Jackson-Madison County. Well, we've got a few minutes. I think next we got some time for some Q&A.
Yep, we do. Before that, though, Bob, thank you for sharing just the work that you're doing. I think you're reminding us that when teacher voice is elevated and prepared and informed, they can make decisions right at the policy level. So I think everyone took back something from what you've shared. And I know for me, I have ideas that are sparking. So I think everyone also had the same feeling. But before we get into Q&A, I wanted to thank you just for sharing
Thank
what the
you.
work that you've been
And I
doing.
and I would love to see these kind of programs pop up everywhere because I just want to see more teachers get involved
Yeah.
in a positive way.
Yeah. With that, any questions that you all may have for Bob while we have him? And Esteban, let me know if you see anything in the chat or if anyone.
Bob, I have a
Yes,
question for you. How did you gather these fellows in terms of like what were your parameters around identifying or reaching out? Was it a direct contact? Did they volunteer? How did the group you had come to be?
That is a great question. And I will say, I think we're going to adjust it a little and widen it for this next year. But for this first group, I and the chief of staff, we sat down and with the superintendent too, and really tried to think, okay, across our schools, like who is maybe that like next layer of like potential leaders or untapped leadership. Maybe they have aspirations to do more, but like they're not there yet. They're not like about to go move into admin or they're about to like move up, but like maybe they have some untapped potential. And so we asked around and we talked to some principals and we kind of looked at, who are people we know and we kind of developed a pool to invite to apply. It was about 25. And so out of that 25, I want to say like 20 or 21 actually did apply. And then from that group, we whittled it down to 12. They had to fill out an application. They had to go through an interview process with me and our chief of staff. Um, and then they also had to agree to, be able to attend all the sessions and meet some, they had to be committed to the program for the full year. And I think next year we're looking to maybe open it up a little more to have a little bit bigger applicant pool. But that was kind of how we did it initially. But it's just who are these kind of untapped potential leaders that, with a little push and development could really, be empowered to speak for our district and become powerful advocates.
I love that. So there was kind of a shadow goal of pipelining people in the process of
Mhm.
actually just giving them experiences. I love
Yeah.
that.
Hillary, what's your question? Oh, did we lose her?
Oh, did we lose her?
No, I'm right here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Shay. Hi, Bob. I'm Hillary, and
Hey,
I'm in California, but super interested and inspired by the work that you're doing.
thank you.
And so, my first question is, and maybe I missed this because I joined a couple minutes late. Is this your first year doing the fellowship?
Yes, this is our kind of inaugural cohort. I kept saying they're my guinea pigs because we're kind of building the
Okay.
plane as we fly it.
And were you involved in policy making or just advocacy prior? So what was your like background coming into it
Mhm.
to then start developing it as a fellowship program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mentioned that I did my gateway to this policy world was I did this teacher educator fellowship that was put on at the state level by SCORE. They're a state level advocacy org and research organization about 10 years ago. And I learned a lot. It was great. And then I just kind of like sat on it for a few years. And then in 2022, I was the West Tennessee Teacher of the Year, which allowed me to serve on the Teacher Advisory Council, where I met Martha and some other great people at the state. And that kind of like, we did some more learning about the policy world. And I kind of remembered, like, this stuff is really interesting. It's important. And the wheels really got turning at that point. And just realizing as I'm here with this Teacher Advisory Council, there was only like, I don't know, 12 of us. And it's like, there there wasn't a lot of opportunities in Tennessee for teachers to learn about the policy process and speak into it. And so, as I wrapped up my time on the advisory council, I kind of had a few conversations with my superintendent about how, like, I feel like I learned all this stuff and I'm like, how can I give back? How can I do something with this and also maybe meet this need? And so he was like, well, come up with a proposal. And so I sat down and I really just came up with this idea, drawing on my experience on the teacher advisory council with SCORE and maybe a few other opportunities, and pitched this to him. And he was like, "All right, let's do it." And so here we are. He tasked me with the chief of staff with actually fleshing it out, and I'm very grateful for Dr. Marlon King. He's our superintendent here. He's very innovative and visionary, and I really appreciate his willingness to trust me to just try something new. And it's worked. And he said we're going to do it again next year. So that's kind of the background in a nutshell.
Okay, so last piece. If so, like I said, I'm inspired, intrigued. And I'm trying to think like, gosh, if I wanted to do something similar or at some point bring this to my school or my organization,
Mhm.
what would be my next step? And so I was kind of thinking, gosh, would you be open to like someone from California auditing or like being a part of your fellowship just to kind of get a feel like throughout the year, like how you move throughout it? And then I don't know, I'd love another California person who maybe we could like try and figure out what are the differences? So to try and create some kind of model to do, because I think this is amazing.
Yeah, like I said, I would love to see it spread, and I would definitely love to talk further with you about that. My email is right there, so just if
Cool.
you would shoot me an email, and I'll be in touch, and we can see what we can do. Because again, I want to see this idea spread. Um, so yeah, please be in touch, and we'll talk.
Will do. Thank you.
Oh, and I will say one more thing: if you want to try to do something like this, I definitely think you need district level support. You need a district leader, maybe not necessarily a superintendent, but someone at the district level who can kind of give you some buy-in and also can give you some connections. I will say a lot of the people that I've been able to invite in to kind of facilitate some of our sessions and like speak on these panels, our superintendent has kind of had those connections to help me bring those individuals in. So you need someone who has some connections at the state level that can kind of point you in the right direction of like, okay, who do you want to network with? Because networking is a big piece of this.
Thank you, Bob. I know we only have a minute left, so we want to wrap up. We will send a recording of the slides, and we will also include Bob's email. So his email address, his LinkedIn, for all of you who want to reach out to him with more information. This was amazing, Bob. So thank you
Thank
again.
you.
Yeah, this was great. But with that, just want to be mindful of time. We're back next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Next week, we'll be having Alice Pack from LA County Office of Ed. She'll be talking about data privacy mistakes that schools make and what are some of the solutions that she has to share based on her experience. But with that, Thank you, Bob. Thank you for all of you for showing up and just being a part of this webinar in our community. And with that, have a great rest of your Wednesday.